All right, everyone, now we have to talk about the Democrats' Inflation Reduction Act. Oh boy, what a label. Now, whenever you see something like this with a very family-friendly sounding happy and cheerful label, it's an act, a law, whatever, you can be sure that it's shenanigans. You think of the Patriot Act, for example. No element of patriotism found therein, but if you oppose it, you hate patriots. Clean coal. Oh, well, it's not really clean, but if you oppose it, then I guess you want dirty coal or something like that. Antifa, anti-fascist action. Well, if you don't support us, then you must be a fascist, right? Then let us go kick the shit out of this 70-year-old woman and then throw bottles of our own poop at the police for no reason. The Inflation Reduction Act is very similar. If you actually go through it, link in the description, archived of course, look through some of the things in here. You're talking nearly 400 billion, that's with a B, dollars for climate change initiatives, and 750 billion in total spending. Now, I believe that it still has to be parsed down further, but it's going to be a considerable amount of funny money spending. This inflation will helpfully show up after the midterms. That's why the timing on this. This is basically the element of the infrastructure bill that wasn't passed before. And they all wanted it. Manchin's even playing ball now. We'll see if he actually holds to it or at the last minute he balks. I think actually it's already in reconciliation though, so might not really matter. When we look at this, you've taken the funny money spending that was proposed before, and in the dead of night effectively with single partisan support, you've passed it through at a very convenient time. Again, it is not coincidental that it's going through now, so that the inflation damage will show up roughly January or February, several months after midterms. There's a reason for that. They always wanted to pass it, but they didn't want that extra damage. The more strategically minded Democrats figured that was a bad idea. It's a goddamn mess. Again, almost $400 billion, and part of it's going to be used to give subsidies for electric vehicles, in other words, coal-powered cars. Let me tell you the problem with this. Who is in the marketplace for even the less expensive electric vehicles? Even like the Chevy Bolt or something like that. People that are at least well within the solid middle class, if not the upper middle class. Specifically people as well that tend to be in more urban areas. Otherwise, they're not going to find a charging station. I mean, I don't know that there's a single charging station, for example, in Rutland, in my hometown. It's small town America, but it is an incorporated city. It has a reasonable population. There's no charging station. I think there are a couple up in Burlington, and that's probably the only ones in the state. So who's going to buy them? People who are relatively well off. They're not worried too much about the interest hikes and so forth within the economy because they're on the market for a new car or at least a good used car. And they're going to get a subsidy on electric vehicles. Who ends up paying for that subsidy? Remember, government can't pay for anything without taking money from some other source first. It doesn't produce anything. It simply shuffles money around, and every time it gets sent from hand to hand, it loses efficiency. You lose a few pennies on the dollar. So $1 of tax money that goes into a welfare program comes out and it's 40 cents. That's the way the government works, as bureaucrats and lawyers and accountants' pockets are lined. Who pays for it? The lower classes. Effectively, this bill asks the poor and the middle class and the lower echelon of the lower working and lower echelon of middle class to pay for things that the upper middle class will actually enjoy. That's all it does. The goal is to reduce emissions by, 30% by 2030 or something. That's not going to happen. What's going to happen is that a handful of people will take the rebate. They'll buy the EV instead of the gas-powered car, only in urban areas and only if they have a commensurate amount of money. That's all that's going to happen with this. This is almost a gift to the donor class more than anything else. Some person, some fucking doctor or lawyer that already is living fairly high on the hog will say, well, I get free money for getting this car. It makes it slightly cheaper than this similarly sized gas-powered vehicle. I'm going to take the poor people's money. Because everyone is in it for themselves at the end of the day, these NIMBYists and so forth. It's not going to help with climate change. It's not going to help with emissions or any of these other boogeymen that have been dreamed up to pass Great Reset agenda sort of laws. All it's going to do is cause more inflation. $700 billion additional to the budget is a significant amount of money. It will cause inflation. Again, it will hit after the midterms. There's a gap of some months before inflation tends to show up when something like this is passed. Right now, we haven't even yet seen the Putin price hikes. The ones that are blamed for the high gas prices. Oh wait, now Biden's responsible singularly for the gas pricing in the U.S. now that it's fallen for several weeks straight. Now all of a sudden his agenda is what caused that. Before he had no clue what he was doing and wasn't responsible for anything. We know this because Biden told us so. All of a sudden his powers have kicked in, I suppose. You cannot reduce inflation by causing inflation. The sum and substance of the idea of the bill is that the investments that you make now, EVs and power grid and roads, and it's sort of like the infrastructure bill, that years later they reduce the deficit. The problem is there's no reason to believe that'll actually happen. There's no reason to believe that any centralized infrastructure plan certainly will ever even bring a return, much less break even. Because that never really happens within government, whether it's federal or state. Even local government's poor at managing such things because there's no profit motive. It's government-centric. They just take money from other people and say this would be a good idea, and then they build it, and occasionally you break roughly even. You're very lucky if that happens. Most of the time, it's a money sink. It's not going to work. It's all speculative. There's one of the main pitching points is, well, it'll reduce the deficit by hundreds of billions of dollars. How do you know? Because some random accountant or financial advisor told you so? Because somebody within the Senate Budgetary Committee or some shit like that said, well, I think this would be a good idea. I think it'll really work out. How many times in the past have we seen bills pitched like this? Do you remember Shovel Ready under Obama? That was pitched as bringing a return, as helping infrastructure and helping the development of green energy, which isn't really green, but whatever, and it would be a benefit long term. Have we seen any benefit from all of that spending? That was back in the early 2010s. No, more than a decade later, no benefit whatsoever. Some of those companies went kaput and became huge money sinks, and the same thing will happen with this bill. This is effectively a grifting pork barrel kickback to a handful of companies that probably all donated to the Biden campaign. This is a handout from the poor to the upper middle class and from the poor to corporations. Meanwhile, they're pretending that they're going to pay for it with a tax on businesses making more than $1 billion in a year. Okay, Sherlock, let's investigate the way the tax code works. If a business is worth billions of dollars, does that necessitate that it makes that much money every year? Or is its net worth calculated entirely different from the amount that they actually make in proceeds? Are they not capable of offshoring those proceeds? Are they not capable of moving part of their industry conglomerate overseas so that on paper in the U.S. they seem to be worth less than that? They've been doing this now for half a goddamn century. What makes you think that this is going to do anything other than send U.S. jobs overseas, inflate the currency a little bit more, tax the lower classes, which supposedly Biden loves so much? He makes many more of them every single day with his shitty economic policies, in order to pay for toys for people that are already well off. People that are in the six-figure salary range most of the time. That's what it really boils down to. The fact that Manchin is playing ball on this is also indicative of the fact that is standing in the way of the Green New Deal part of the infrastructure bill, which was many moons ago, was just strategic. And I believe I pointed that out at the time. It was the timing, it wasn't the principle. He's not a principle, he's not a fiscal conservative or something. He just said, look, the Democrats are going to really fuck themselves if we add to the inflation this extra hundreds of billions and then we go into the midterms. Shh. Just wait for a few more months and then I'll be on board. Very, very underhanded, Joe. That's about all. Peace out.